So this is part 5 of this series. It might be the last one. Probably I'll feel the need to make to do something extra at the end. But I'm busy now with the last few slides of the talk I gave a few weeks ago, and just a couple of topics are left in the slides, and I think this is roughly where I got to. I told you about Bayes' rule and how I justify try to justify to you why I'm almost certain that Lucy Letby is innocent, practically certain. I could explain to you what would make me change my mind. Some things could make me change my mind. In particular, a confession given out of her own free will, where she moreover explains details of how she actually killed some of those babies, details which are not known at present, but which can be retrospectively verified. So this is called having, she could prove that she has knowledge which only the perpetrator could know. That would make a confession into something having very strong evidential value. Now, I think the chance is less than 1 in a million that will ever happen. I'm practically certain it won't. Another thing about my 1 in a million probability is, of course, we can never, if I would make a bet with somebody, we could never settle the bet because we will never know the actual truth. I mean, God knows. You can argue that Lucy Letby knows. But if you're not prepared to believe Lucy Letby, then there's no way we can settle the bet. We would have to make a different bet, and the bet would be something like, what is the chance? Is Lucy Letby generally accepted to be innocent, and that this was the biggest miscarriage of justice in UK legal history? I mean, that might be something which is true. I mean, generally accepted in 10 years' time, or 20, might not. So that one could make a bet about that. But then that depends on how one, what one thinks about the UK legal system and its ability to learn from mistakes. And if you're pessimistic like me, then I would not be prepared to bet a lot on that, though I'd certainly be prepared to bet quite something. Okay, so one of the last slides in the sort of serious part of the talk was talking about the media and the experts. And in fact, I've said many of these things in the last talk already. The mainstream media and present-day social media seem to have been perfectly free to broadcast and expand on the prosecution case. I mean, they have delighted in it. They have bathed in it. The rules only silence thoughtful criticism of prosecution arguments. And this is very sad. And this means perhaps that the UK legal system ought to be changed in some way or another. Maybe they should make a bit of a move towards a continental system. I mean, the British system is basically medieval. It's roughly based on the Magna Carta, which said that if one of the barons got in trouble with the king, then a bunch of his fellow barons were the ones who would decide who was right, and that they were strong barons and a weak king. And then over the centuries, this gradually got expanded to, to property owners, to male property owners, then also even to women, and then even to poor people. And it's got to where it has got to. On the continent, there used to be many different systems in different countries, but one thing happened to a lot of countries, which was that Napoleon invaded, and the ancien regime, the previous regime, was overthrown, and a new regime was set up. Now, of course, Napoleon didn't stay in command forever. He got finally defeated, kicked out, thanks to, Wellington and so on, and the European allies. But the fact that Napoleon had overthrown the ancient regimes of the various European countries he conquered, allowed those countries, after he was kicked out, to bring in new laws and new constitutions, and because actually at the time in many of those countries, the kind of progressive and liberals, the left-leaning intelligentsia like myself, the Guardian readers, and so on, they actually saw that Napoleon was bringing much-needed reforms. They liked the ideas of the Enlightenment. It was basic Enlightenment thinking, the separation of the powers, how to have an independent and sensible judiciary, and so on. And unfortunately, England was spared that. Oh my God! If only Napoleon had beaten them. I mean, you could say, if only the Spanish Armada had won earlier. If only Hitler had won earlier, briefly. Each time countries actually successfully invaded and the invaders get chucked out, many reforms are made. People rethink. They think, why did we lose? Of course, and they're overjoyed to have things back how they were, but they don't usually actually make things exactly how they were. And all over Europe, we have seen that again and again. So being invaded by some evil invader is actually leads to faster modernization, much needed modernization of state institutions. And as I say, it meant the Enlightenment got to most of the continent, but it sort of didn't get to the UK. Did get to Scotland, by the way. Right. There are remarks here about experts on the minds of serial killers and true crime. I've talked about that a lot in other videos. I don't think I want to do it again, but it's a fact that I will come back to that. Part of the point of a jury trial is that ordinary people tend to believe they know if somebody's lying or not, and we are all experts in psychology. We all believe we are experts. We all believe we are experts in psychology. We are human beings. It's what we do all the time. Figure out the psychology of the people we have to interact with and find out if they're allies or enemies and what we can do with them, and how we can have them on our side and benefit from that. That's what we all do all the time. That's what these huge brains are for. And our faces, all those facial expressions, all that body language, that's what we do all the time, is judge psychology. It's only like some autistic people like me who don't look at people's faces when they're talking to them, but prefer to look at their shoes in order to concentrate on the actual content. We're not so good at multitasking. Of course, we're often males as well. And same thing. Right. So people believe they understand the minds of other people and take pride in knowing for sure early in a trial whether somebody is actually evil killer or not. And if they take pride in it and boast about their ideas and explain their conviction to their friends and their followers on Facebook and X and so on and so forth, they will suffer confirmation bias. They will be wedded to their initial gut feelings right, which may often be right, but may often be wrong too. They won't be able to leave them. Yes, and we all love, well, not all of us, but I love true crime. I watch lots of YouTube true crime people, and I find some of them extremely good in understanding the psychology of killers in cases where it's clear that the killers did kill. So I'm thinking of one particular true crime rocket science, TCRS, an American, no, sorry, actually South African gentleman who was originally, well, I don't know what he studied at university. I think he studied journalism. He was a journalist, and he's very skilled YouTube video maker. He has an enormous following because he can explain to you what was going on in the minds of the boyfriend of that poor girl in America. And now I forget the name of the case, but people who follow true crime will know the Gabby Petito case, and her boyfriend Brian, who was evil or became evil, didn't actually have had tendency to evil when he was young, by the way, I think, but it was obvious there was something wrong with him. Uncontrollable anger from time to time, many times, and kind of inferiority complex. And Gabby had a lot of things which he didn't have, and he was like an accessory to her. Well, anyway, shouldn't be talking about this case. But okay, the same guy, TCRS, who has made very insightful videos about that case and about a couple of other cases where there truly were crimes, has made incredibly ghastly, uninsightful videos on the Lucy Letby case. He has bought the prosecution view. He knows she's evil and a killer, and he will explain to you, he has explained to you at length how he knows and what the red flags which he could see, right? He fell for that bullshit. He's very convinced, and so he's very convincing because he's like a good journalist. Right, that's enough about that, I think. So these were like the concluding remarks in my talk, but it wasn't the last slide. So there'll be a few more slides and a few more things I want to say. Now, the whole idea of a jury trial is at the end of the trial, the jurors should all be convinced that the accused is a guilty person, and of course, the public should all feel that. A trial is theatre. It's meant to seal, the will of the state. R.V. Lucy Letby. It's the king, the minions of the king against Lucy Letby, and they've come to the conclusion that Lucy Letby is evil and needs to be extinguished. But they want to have public approval of that. They want to have the public on their side, obviously, otherwise the state institutions will get into trouble. And so you want the jury to feel in their guts, by observing the behavior of the accused under cross-examination, that she really is guilty. Okay? They want to learn that she lies, that she's a bad person. But they want to they need to know that in their guts. That's the point. That's the point. And the problem is that when there's actually no evidence, all you have is the result of torture, psychological warfare by the prosecuting barrister under the eyes of the world, under the eyes of the jury. That's all there is, because there is no evidence. There is no evidence. So complex scientific evidence also only gets believed to some extent, by the public and the jury and the journalists following the case, in part because of the prosecutor's experts' skill as presenting themselves as trustworthy authorities. This was very nicely illustrated in the Lucia de Berk trials, which was not a jury trial, but it was still a show trial. It was an inquiry, and still it was important to convince the public that Lucia was evil. And the prosecution had a statistician witness, a former friend of mine, who was absolutely brilliant at making the public believe that what he had to say was very difficult, and kind of making them flatter themselves that they understood his reasoning, because he was a very good teacher. He was very good at simplifying things in such a way that people thought they understood, and then they could be proud that they'd understood. It was flattery. He was very good at flattering. The defense also had a statistician, not even a statistician actually, a mathematician, probabilist, who was absolutely no good at this game, and the judges got angry with him because he tried to argue logically with them. But, well, that was wonderful. They said to him, Professor Meister, we are not here to do thought experiments. We are here to determine facts. He was trying to argue by, what is it when you argue something by assuming the opposite is true and showing it leads you to a contradiction, right? That's a kind of argument which actually only mathematicians and really intelligent people understand, that if you can show that some assumptions lead to a contradiction, then the assumptions must be wrong, right? Well, Professor Meister tried to convince a board of 3 Dutch judges that a certain calculation done by the statistician of the prosecution, he wanted to convince them that it was wrong, because if he'd used the same method when there were not 3 hospitals but 100, for instance, that it would lead to something completely ridiculous, namely convicting every single nurse who worked at every single hospital, provided she worked at 100 hospitals, of course. Now, judges were just not interested. And it's a bit like Goss was simply not interested in learning that what was it? That the air embolism stuff was just total garbage. He was not interested in the science. He had legalistic reasons why he could take no notice of it, because unfortunately the science was already known. So it was just, he didn't listen, took no notice. He didn't bother to understand the science. I don't suppose he could have done, but he certainly felt that he had absolutely no need to try to understand it, because he had a legal argument why it could be ignored, and the legal argument was based on case law, which is based on previous judges' rulings. It's not actually a law passed by Parliament, but it's how case law has developed. So it's sort of the present state of what judges tend to do, and if they want to follow precedent, then this is something they can do. And they love being able to use precedent in order to clear things up rapidly. Well, as I also said and emphasized, that was the witch hunt part. Suppose heart-rending crimes are suspected. Society falls into a moral panic. Moral outrage means authorities must swiftly find the perpetrator and deal with them. And if there's actually no evidence against the suspect, whom investigators do manage to identify, they will still, because of the moral outrage, because of the obligation to do something about this awful thing, they will proceed with prosecution, and they'll use all the tools of the witch hunter to convince the jury they work, and they learn that they work. There are many convicted serial killer nurses in the UK prisons, 10 times as many as in other countries relative to the number of nurses, which is really interesting. And the thing is that police and prosecutors have learned what convinces jurors and copy it and use it again and again. Many, many examples of that. And of course, the tools of the witch hunter. By the way, at the time when the witch hunting was at its peak, which was not in medieval times, like in medieval times, everybody believed in witches. In early modern times, not everybody believed in witches. There were plenty of intellectuals, learned and educated people who didn't believe in witches, and some of them wrote learned treatises actually identifying the tools of the sort of professional witch hunters and explaining that they weren't garbage. So they published books and pamphlets and scientific papers explaining why the methods which were being used to convict and subsequently burn witches were flawed and were guaranteed to lead to many miscarriages of justice. So this was known among sort of educated circles. A lot of educated circles in the 17th, 16th and 17th century. Okay. So the thing is, so that's the summary. Such trials solve the societal problem at hand, because there is a societal problem, because it is an outrage that there are all these deaths happening in this hospital and they seem to be connected to a particular nurse, and that is shocking and appalling. And unfortunately, solving the problem also presents the public with an engrossing spectacle, and there are people who are specialized in helping the spectacle and appearing on TV, explaining how they know why they know. Next slide. Okay, I need to talk a bit about the insulin evidence, and really this should be a different talk with lots of information about that and going into it in detail, because it is a subtle and complex and a scientific matter. And the problem is, there are many problems there, and one of the problems, I think, is that forensic science in the UK was privatized in 2012. The forensic science regulator writes beautiful regulations, but lawyers and judges do not know them. Nobody enforces them. Lawyers and judges can't really read them because they don't have enough training. They don't have enough scientific feeling for science, for hard science, or for mathematics, to understand the words, to read the words in those regulations. And this is there are many roots of the Lucy Letby debacle, and of course the problems of the NHS is one of them. The problems of forensic science is another in the UK specifically, and the problems of a completely past its expiry date judicial system is one of them. A completely out of control, a completely crazy media, completely crazy social media, right? I'm not causing for censorship and stuff. I'm calling for a bit more common sense, and I think that once Lucy Letby is freed, and there is an inquiry into how this could happen, one of the things to look at is the role of the newspapers and the role of social media. There are lessons to be learned. Lessons to be learned. When terrible things happen, the right thing is that you learn from them. You hold an inquiry, an investigation, a careful investigation. You find out what the cause of the disaster was. This is how they do it with air crashes. And you find out what it is that you need to learn to stop it from happening again. Now, this was a mega disaster for the UK, And so it's going to take a mega inquiry, and there's going to be serious delay, objections to it happening, because it's so badly needed, and because it affects so many parts of UK society. But the debacle has affected UK's reputation in the world, and something has to be done about it. A little bit on the insulin here, and I'm probably going to have to give myself an extra 5 minutes just to get through the slides. And as I said, I really should make a separate talk on the insulin issues. There's just a remark here that Sarita Adams, a British biochemist in the US, a brilliant biochemist, I will say. I'm sure. I've studied her work very carefully. I'm not a biochemist, but I can judge, I can see almost genius, though a little narrow. She doesn't know so much about statistics. Many things she's a little bit deaf and blind to. A highly autistic woman, and unfortunately a highly vulnerable woman who's had a bad time through various life experiences. Anyway, Sarita Adams, I got to know her when I think I was introduced to her in March or so during the big trial, and actually was working with her in May or so, and helped her send her findings to Judge Goss, but they were intercepted by a clerk of Goss's court, and he never saw them. The clerk gave them to Chester Constabulary, who sent intimidating letters to Adams and to myself and to other scientists who were blogging at the time with powerful criticism of the science. And we were all more or less stopped. I think the thing to say here is that what we were saying has all been confirmed. Of course, there are details. I mean, we didn't have access. We didn't have access to the court transcripts. We only had access to what Tattle Life was publishing on internet, which was basically extracts from the newspapers, and has since disappeared. Even we had basic access to what was being said in the newspapers, and this was enough to draw far-reaching conclusions. And Sarita Adams' conclusions have been basically confirmed by independent scientists who by now do have access to everything that she did not have access to. And so Sarita was violently attacked by the trolls, the guilty crowd, and I'm restarting the clock here, give myself just 10 minutes now. There it goes. Just to round off. Sarita was trolled in the most ghastly way. They discovered that there were issues about her PhD, whether or not she'd actually got the PhD. Presently, I'm convinced she did get the PhD and that she got it in 2017. I don't know for sure because I've never seen the diploma. There's a fake diploma appeared on the internet. I think it was faked by a bent lawyer who was helping her fight one of the trolls, and which was and how she tried to do that, and the legal action which her lawyers took on her behalf was legally unwise, and it was unwise to fight back. So that way, I mean, she should have put a picture of her actual diploma on internet, and she still hasn't done that. And since Cambridge University doesn't tell you personal information about former students of theirs without their permission, without Sarita's permission, it may never be proven, though actually I have contacts in Cambridge who tell me a way, which I think we will follow, maybe know in a few months, and I will report. But anyway, the point here is that the problems which were found, identified during the trial by qualified experts and even communicated to Judge Goss, but who never actually received the communications, they have been confirmed. They have been confirmed. You can, there are things where there are things we couldn't know and which we now do know, and we might have been, our best guesses then might have been wrong, but that's not a criticism. Right. Okay, next slide. The future. Now, I think that if Lucy's conviction is overturned, and if in particular the insulin evidence is thoroughly discredited in the way it should be and will be, I believe, by the new research, which has, really new research, which has been done in the last months by several experts, international experts, also a British lady, but the thing is, insulin metabolism of a recently born premature baby is not the insulin metabolism of a normally born child a few weeks after birth, even, let alone months or years later. And I think that if Lucy's conviction is overturned, this is going to increase the doubts on 4 other UK serial killer nurses who've all been convicted using immunoassay insulin findings. And personally, I suspect 3 of them at least are innocent. I sort of know for sure one of them is. I don't know the other cases so well, but I really don't see any reason to believe that 3 of those 4 are guilty. And this is going to be that will be an even bigger shock, right? If overturning Lucy Letby's conviction triggers overturning of 2 or 3 or 4 others, that would be like a good thing if those convictions are indeed false, unsafe. That would be a great thing, but the consequences will be even greater. And so that could be a reason why the authorities are not going to do anything about Lucy Letby, because the consequences could be so great. But anyway, I'm going to stay optimistic. I think this is going to come right in the end, and I think the end might be sort of sooner rather than later, but I think there's a big chance it could be somewhat later. I will stay optimistic, and of course I'm going to stay fighting as long as I have breath in my body, and a sane mind. Which one is going to give out first is a matter of it's nobody's business. It's not of great interest. One or the other will be my fates, obviously, at age 73 with various medical issues. Right, so there's a slide here with a little bit about what I have been doing, and one of the things I wanted to say is that I'm not qualified to be an independent scientific expert on this case, and I don't want to be, and I never did want to be. I worked on the case. I've been following the case since 2017. I worked writing a report, the report by the Royal Statistical Society, which distills our common joint wisdom about the statistical issues in these cases. And we published it before the trial in 2022, and we distributed it to the parties. And since then, I felt that I have done my bit for Lucy Letby. As I said, I'm convinced she's innocent. It's going to be very hard to change my mind on that, but it could happen, naturally. I have been an agitator a conspiracy theorist, if you like. I'm conspiring with people, and we had to conspire because we were saying things which could not be said in public, legally, first of all, could not be said in public, and later could not be said in public because you got a heap of trolls like a ton of bricks over you, and you got such incredible abuse, and people didn't want to believe you, and you might lose friends and so on. People would get very upset if you said, I think Lucy Letby is probably innocent. That happened to a number of my, well, not my close friends, but to, say, relatives kind of went ballistic. A relative. I have a lot of relatives. One of my cousins went ballistic and sent me hateful messages where I had said on a group chat of extended family that, by the way, I was convinced Lucy Letby was innocent. Most of my relations, my extended family, wisely kept their mouths shut. I think many do believe me by now, certainly, and I still meet most of them from time to time, typically at funerals these days, and people are friendly. Okay, and I tell them what's going on if they ask, not if they don't ask. Right. So this is kind of the end. I have to see I have had 2 slides more, and one of them is this one: the deaths at the Countess of Chester soon after the transfer from the Countess of Chester, and this comes from Lady Thirlwall, and red means guilty, and notice that there are a number of deaths. There are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 10 deaths, which were natural, as far as anybody can see. There's totally reasonable explanation. Got nothing to do with Lucy Letby. 10. Of course, a couple were outside of Countess of Chester. They were after transfer from Countess of Chester. So even transfer from Countess of Chester didn't save lives there. And many of them are in 6 of them are basically in a 6-month window, which is 1 a month. 1 a month. 1 a month. I'm going to give myself just a few. Well, I'm going to put it on pause. No, I'll put it on 10 minutes. It's better. There's a period where Lucy didn't do anything, next to nothing. January the 16th, she's death was expected. No, sorry, it's marked yellow. I don't know why it's marked yellow there, but there are. Okay, on the 23rd of October 2015, there is one of the air embolism, air via nasogastric tube things. But there are like 6 months there with 6 natural deaths, if not 8. More than 1 a month. Now, those F***ing specialists, the Gang of 7, as Gibbs proudly calls them, the Gang of 7 pediatricians, consultant pediatricians, they knew there was 1 death a month for 6 or 7 months in the middle of that window when Lucy Letby was allegedly killing lots of babies. They knew that the number of deaths per year on that unit wasn't, in that period, as wouldn't have been 2 or 3 per year, right? At most 1 every 4 months. It wouldn't have been that without Lucy Letby. Even without Lucy Letby, it couldn't have been that. Jairam and Breary, who should have known these numbers, Breary certainly should have known those numbers because he was the neonatal lead and responsible for giving the annual statistics every year to Embrace and so on and so forth. Breary knew these numbers. Breary knew that this was not a period when the death rate should have been on average 3 a year, on average 1 every 4 months. He knew in a big patch it should have been 1 a month. Really? What Jairam knew, I have no idea. He certainly should have known this too, but he went behind the backs of management and went to the police and pushed the police even further and pushed them to change their mind about whether or not there was something to investigate there. And he told untruths, which he should have known were untruths, to those nice police inspectors. It's so obvious. The case needs to be, Lucy Letby needs to be set free immediately. And there needs to be a major inquiry into how this could possibly happen. Yeah, it's so obvious, and God bless Lady Thirlwell for producing this stuff. Of course, she kind of put out a plea to have her inquiry stopped, but the government did not take the hint. They could have stopped it or paused it, but she didn't, so she is not to blame that it continues wasting taxpayers' money either. West Streeting is keeping his eyes tight shut. Sir Keir Starmer, former head of public prosecution, is keeping his eyes tight shut. And I suppose they're all hoping that this is all going to go away, or at least when it comes back, they won't be in government anymore. Well, yeah, I'm all for that, really. Anyway, well, I'm not all for that. It takes that long, but of course, if the case collapses today, because prosecution because the CCRC reports and the Court of Appeal agrees, and the convictions are quashed rapidly, it's still going to be a long time before we are told the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's going to take a long time. Anyway, it's clear clear to me what the authorities should do. It's clear to me that they probably won't do it, because they're all playing a delaying game and a pass the buck game and make sure my arse is covered and that somebody else gets the blame. Police are clearly doing it. They can blame the consultants and they can blame Evans. Right. Prosecution can blame the police, and so on and so forth. Everybody can blame somebody else. So that's fine. So nobody has to get the real blame. And everybody will live happily ever after. And the parents will eventually get a huge amount of money, and their lawyers will, of course, have done mightily well out of this. So in the end, the British taxpayer will have paid, and lawyers will have won, have benefited. The parents will get compensation, and the question is how much and when. That's the only question. The lawyers want it to be soon rather than later, for obvious reasons. But if the case collapses now, it's going to be later rather than soon. They have a conflict of interest. Okay, I am now going to stop the recording.